Observations, the questions, the connections, and the explanations we make for everything that we see around us. And we take it out of our head and get it onto a piece of paper using words and pictures and numbers. We're going to be able to develop a set of skills that allows you to sit down in any situation and understand how you can take whatever you see around you, document it onto the piece of paper. The observations are our first step. Expand that into finding the mysteries around us, and then build those to start to make explanations. Languages are words, pictures, and numbers. Let's take a look at them one at a time. When we use words in our journal, this allows us to be very, very specific and to dial in on a detail that we know we want to record. And that leads us to strategy number 2, the pictures. When we're putting pictures and drawings into our journals, the way our brain works is fundamentally different than the way it works when we're just when we're just writing with words. They take up different parts of our brain. So if we're intentional, they're useful. So when you see something, if you can describe part of that using a visual strategy, right, this is successful. So this can look like a map. This could be a very simplified diagram. It could be a portrait of something. The pictures can also be zoomed in. The pictures can show an object from different angles. So there's going to be a lot of different. And so too with looking at the numbers. If we start counting, measuring, timing, and finding numbers in the phenomenon that we observe, this trains us to be really specific in a different kind of way. We're going to train ourselves when we can't be specific and say there's 45. How to estimate and how to estimate things with accuracy and precision. This system of words, pictures, and numbers, getting everything that comes out of your head and down into your journal, is the secret that opens the door to being an observer, an adventurer, someone who can walk into any environment and make discoveries.
I find something that's interesting. So for instance, right here, I found this little cone from one of the trees that's around me. And if I want to notice more details about it, what I do is to just start by saying my observations out loud. The trick here is out loud. Now, saying that if I can start a sentence saying, I notice, right? That's an observation. So all the things that I notice is I'm just saying anything I notice, I say it out loud. So if you see something, say something. You actually haven't run out of observations and things that you could notice. What's happened is that your brain has just gotten a little bit distracted. So just when that happens, if you slow down, just go back to like, oh, I'm just making observations, and just say, I notice. When I'm doing my I wonders, I'm going to try to get myself to be more curious about whatever object I've found. So I am going to start to ask questions about what I see. I hold up my object and I say to myself, a really good trick is to try the who, what, where, when, how, why prompts. And you can just sort of say, now we're ready for the third and final step. It's called it reminds me of. When I do my it reminds me ofs, what I do is I say out loud any connection that I can make with the object that I'm looking at and, well, anything else that I can remember. So as I look at this, you see what I'm doing is anything that is a connection in my head, I want to say those it reminds me ofs out loud. Very often, hidden in your it reminds me ofs are really interesting ideas, really interesting connections between this object that we're looking at and other things that we have learned or other things we've seen and experienced. The more that we can network those together, we end up with a really interesting way of playing with ideas, playing with our observations. When you make interesting it reminds me ofs, they often stimulate you to ask other questions or perhaps to make more observations. You say, it reminds me of this. A natural kind of follow-up to that is, why does it remind me of this? In what way is it similar to that? In what way is it different? So let's try this now. With the object that you're holding, Pause the video and in 1 minute, see how many "it reminds me ofs" you can come up with from looking at this object.
Using words, pictures, and numbers to record "I notice," that's all your observations. "I wonder," every question you can think of. And "it reminds me of," the connections that you make. They all come together on the journal page.
I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of is a wonderful system, and I apply it every time I go to it, and it helps my brain wrap around it in a really dynamic way. I then get that I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of down on my page. I use my words, I use my pictures, I use my numbers, and each one of those will help me document and record different aspects of what I see.